Well, but we can talk about this if you want. These
Mm,
stories just frustrate me because it's
yeah.
like nothing's going to happen. So, as ProPublica writes here, Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito took a luxury fishing trip to Alaska with billionaire Paul Singer, whose hedge fund then had repeated business before SCOTUS over the years that followed. Alito never discussed the trip or recused himself from Singer's cases. Alito wrote a defense of himself in what was the outlet again? I forget, but it was a conservative outlet. And his defense is, well, the plane seat, the seat on the private jet was going to be empty anyways. So it wasn't really my seat. I was just sitting there because the seat was going to be empty. Like, that's his defense. Like, how
Whomst
insane.
amongst us doesn't get presented with the opportunity to take
Exactly.
a seat on a private. It happens to me all the time. I mean, what are you supposed to do?
It was the Wall Street Journal. He wrote it, because he knows this is coming out. He didn't respond to ProPublica, who did the piece, and so he had his own defense of it, and that was his defense. That there was an empty seat, like, and nothing's gonna happen. Like, clearly he should not be on the Supreme, as Thomas should not be on. And what's gonna happen? Nothing.
Yeah,
Of course.
that's what makes it so
so
frustrating. It's just the inherent hopelessness that you feel when you keep seeing story after story after story of corruption on the Supreme Court, and they won't even adopt a binding code of ethics. It's just insane. And also, don't forget Gorsuch, by the way, who didn't disclose that the law firm that purchased his property that was sitting there for years until he was confirmed to the Supreme Court. He just mentioned that his property was sold, but he didn't disclose who bought it. It was a law firm with business before the Supreme Court. So not as serious, obviously, as the Alito and Clarence Thomas stuff. But I mean, it's just there's no transparency. There's so many conflicts of interest and them refusing to recuse themselves. But yet at the same time, shit's going to happen. So, it's frustrating to read these stories because it's not surprising. It just... it's happening, but when you have the information, what do you do with it?
And then there was a story that came out. I don't remember if it was just came out this week, like in contrast to the Alito story, or if it was an older story that people dug up. But apparently, Justice Kagan was worried about a bagel lunch breaking campaign finance law. Breaking whatever finance laws the Supreme Court has to file or whatever. Whereas the conservative justices are going on private planes and taking fancy trips and who knows what else.
Going to the Nazi gardens.
But then the ones considered the liberal justices are worried about like bagels.
A bagel.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if things were flipped and this was like a liberal justice doing this shit. Like, the right would be free. I bet you they would be able to get them removed from the bench. Like, they would take the steps, and you'd get Democrats on board because they're justified. Like, 100%. I think they'd be able to do it.
I mean, it's also a perfect like encapsulation of the liberal mindset too. Like, I mean, probably shouldn't be worried about bagels. And then also working side by side with these guys in a way that, what's her name? RBG was always such good friends with Scalia, and there's those photos of them like on elephants together, and but Scalia had no problem, deciding the way he would decide, and then RGB would go out there and defend him as a smart mind and a good friend. Yeah, it's bullshit.